Hola, chicas. Welcome to Encuentras Your Voice podcast to listen to amazing Latina journeys from pain points to thriving authentically by embracing cultural identity. I'm your host, Consuelo Crosby, coming to you every Wednesday here from the sunny California Pacific Coast. We are here on our last August episode. I can't believe summer is ending and getting ready for those fall moods. I know you love your cozy vibes, you love your PSLs, you love your sweaters. It's all coming at you. I like to say that the summer goddess is grabbing her shawl off the chair from the sweaty dance floor of summer and walking off into those days that are fleeting, but still bringing so much joy. Just like today, because we are in conversation with an amazing mujer today, whose purpose is to teach awareness so that we all can help in the preservation of Oaxaca's indigenous food and beverage cultures. So you are in for a treat today with Fabiola Santiago, who is from Santiago, Mazatlan, Oaxaca, Mexico, and belongs to the indigenous Zapotecs of the Central Valley, whose ancestry stems from the indigenous Mezcal makers of the region. She is founder of Mi Oaxaca, an organization dedicated to indigenous Oaxacan cultural preservation to push back against erasure and cultural appropriation. Fabiola shares how the recent popularity of Mezcal across the world threatens indigenous Mezcal makers, whitewashing the importance of the beverage in spiritual and societal traditions, and how we can all act in support of Oaxacan communities seeking to retain their resources, secure the comunidad, and maintain their livelihood. It's really heart-filling that more recently we are paying attention to how we impact each other. It's just life-filling. As is Fabiola. She is from the earth, a catalyst for social justice, a protector of her ancestry, and a leader in stewardship of land and cultures. Plus, the happy educator of Mezcal origins, expressing its complexity and individuality that speaks to the region and families who produce it. This one's so much fun. It will take you all over the place. You will get fired up in the gentle strength that Fabiola guides us by, so that next time you are ordering a Mezcal cocktail or perhaps doing a tasting, you will be leaning in Latina to support Mi Oaxaca and Fabiola's passion, and also learn how to visit her motherland with grace and appreciation. So happy you are here for this intimate insights of the indigenous Oaxacan traditions, the knowledge and the spirituality that we are so fortunate to learn from one of her own. Sit back, get cozy, and get ready to walk through her Oaxacan motherland with Fabiola Santiago. Welcome to Encuentras Your Voice podcast, Fabiola. I'm so happy and honored that you're sharing your time with us here today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
This is a very compassionate episode, I feel. This really drives home for me. It made me think so much, both from your own life journey and from what you're doing to impact your heritage and the world. We're really excited to get into it. But as always, we love to honor our ancestry and learn about your heritage journey from your family.
Yeah. I am from a small pueblo in Oaxaca. It's called Santiago, Mazatlan. It is an hour from the city, and it is part of the Central Valley region. So that makes us Central Valley Zapotec people. And my parents' generation still speaks Zapotec. I listen to that language in the home and understand quite a bit of it, and also practicing it, but it's not as good as my parents' is. So I consider myself a diasporic Zapoteca, but also have a lot of connection to the town. So sometimes it's Matateca. My family migrated to Los Angeles my father first in the 80s, and then my mother and my brother and I in 1992. So we resided there for about 20-ish years. And then I moved to the Bay Area about 11 years ago. So yeah, that's been the journey.
Oh, it's a beautiful journey. One that I haven't heard yet in our journey here on the podcast. So this is going to be very fresh and new, and we have a lot to learn from you. So when you came to LA and you were raised deeply into your culture, what was it like for you then growing up in Los Angeles?
Going from a small town, a pueblo, to a city like LA was complete context. But I was also 5.5, almost 6 years old. So like that to me was the only reality I knew and knew of. And at that age, for some reason, I thought that all children had to cross borders to meet their fathers. Yeah.
Wow.
And, you know, one of the sweetest memories that I have as a child, as an elementary school student, is my first friend. I was ESL, so we were put in a different class with other students who didn't know a lick of English. And during recess, we were sitting at a bench, and then we were talking about, like, where are you from? And she said Oaxaca as well. So I was really lucky that I grew up around a lot of Oaxacan folk, and I knew that I was Oaxaqueña from like the very beginning.
Oh,
Yeah.
that made you felt like, okay, I'm not too far away from my home. I'm here with the comfort of what you knew already. So you stayed within your culture and your immediate surroundings and didn't really feel a need to assimilate or journey into trying to be separated from the culture then?
I would say not until middle school.
Oh, infamous middle school. Isn't it wicked?
Yeah, I would say not until middle school and then high school. I think like that's where a lot of humans, right? We just go through like, who are we? What are we? Where do we belong? It was definitely in middle school where I understood that being Oaxaqueña was not something that I should be proud of, because that was the first time that I heard derogatory terms and slurs at Oaxacan people, like, you know, Maria, Oaxaquita, India, all that kind of stuff.
My goodness.
And more so from like northern Mexican peers, which I was like, wait, aren't we all like Mexican though?
Where do you think that comes from then?
I mean, Mexico is also like a very classist, racist place. And, you know, like it's also experienced its colonialism. And the toxic stuff has also stayed. And southern Mexico tends to be like, has a lot more indigenous presence. And the northern has been a lot more conquered, I would say, or colonized. So there is a difference in how I think in that era there was more like a desire to assimilate, and like because there's a little bit more like mestizaje within northern Mexicanos. We're very proud of being who we are, and yet we are actually very proud of our indigenous roots. And now that not everyone, but there is a movement of Latinx folks trying to reconnect with their indigenous roots and their indigeneity, like we should be respected because we've not changed, or at least as much, who we are at our core, whether that's our food, our language, our traditions, our customs, our art, our culture, like just so much. And it is because of Oaxaca that Mexico has, I mean, I'm biased, of course, has just like powerful presence.
Definitely. I notice that a lot. And I'm sure all our listeners, and if not, they can learn that the real beauty of Mexico and its expanse, and like you're saying, the indigenous, the passing on of the culture and the traditions, the attire, the dance, the food, everything really gives it its unique vibrancy still. Did you feel this draw back to the culture, like that representation, as you were headed towards your first career in college, or where did you go first before focusing back to Oaxaca?
I think it's always been there. It just was not clear. I'm the first in my family to graduate high school, college, grad school, all the stuff, right? And education in my family was not necessarily valued in the ways that other immigrant families, I'm going to say, value it. And to me, it makes sense. Like my parents had to start working when they were children, and their livelihood, their sustenance came from work. And so that's something that they prioritized. I mentioned that because when the idea of college came up or was brought up to my attention of a possibility, I was like, well, neither of my parents have gone, but like I do like to study. I like education. I like to learn. I was undocumented and I worked in the restaurant industry. And the majority of the back of the house or the kitchen staff, the dishwashers, preps, etc., they're from Oaxaca. And then the front of the house or the wait staff, etc., hostess, cashier were mostly white. I started as a cashier, and then I had to really advocate for myself to get like serving positions and to get good tips, right? Because that's where the good tips are.
Yeah.
And advocate for myself to get like the night shifts and certain sections of the restaurant where we know like it just generates like, you know, we can turn tables faster. But then it was like, wait, I'm going home with like tips, and it's through those tips that I paid for college and grad school, mostly as an undocumented person, and came out debt free. But then I would look at the counterpart of like the kitchen, and I'm like, they're like working just as hard, and like I wouldn't be able to do my job if it weren't for them cooking, cleaning, washing the dishes, prepping, all that kind of stuff. Like, why don't they get tips? How come immigrant people get paid less, do more work, and like people who have papers, because most of them in the front of the house had, you know, were born in the US, like they have so many privileges.
Yes.
So that's actually what generated my interest in public health, which is what I got my master's in. And I did a research project on wage theft. And of course, it affects low income workers the most, and restaurant workers being one of them. And then there was this like campaign in Oakland against a restaurant that allegedly stole the wages, the recipes of a Oaxaqueña, and then fired her. And that was like that was actually the second moment of like, okay, this is enough.
Oh my Lord. That's a lot to absorb from a young age with your personality, with who you are, born to be, that you saw this as a call to action. Whereas for a lot of people, I think they would be so struck down by the injustice of it and feeling kind of helpless. But it seems like this was more of a call to action for you.
I'm glad that you see it that way. I'll say, like, I don't think I've had a choice personally. I mean, of course I have choices, right? But like, for me, I'm like, there's no other choice. Like, there is no other choice.
This is who you are. Yeah.
No, that's a part of it too. That's definitely a part of it.
So for the love of Oaxaca, the love of your culture, you came back around to this moment of the real pride that you hold and wanting to, yes, social justice, but also capture in the moment, probably from what you've seen happening, especially this incident, stealing the actual recipes from the woman. How did that inspire you? What came next after that?
The immediate thing was actually, I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm actually Oaxaqueña. I know recipes, which actually my mom shared with me through the phone after she was deported. You know, because I was like, I took for granted every single Sunday that we had a Oaxacan meal when she was around, when I was a child. And it was just like, oh, it's always going to be there.
So let's talk about Mi Oaxaca. Mi Oaxaca is your entrepreneurial journey towards archiving your Oaxacan culture, the traditions, the heritage, but with purpose. So why don't you go ahead and describe what your organization is all about?
Mi Oaxaca's purpose, and that is actually what we say. We say purpose. We don't use mission because we are trying to be decolonial in as many ways as possible, is to preserve Oaxacan Indigenous food and culture through storytelling, cultural education programming, and collaboration with compatible organizations across borders. And I would say that that's phase 2, or like second iteration of what it used to be.
Oh, okay.
Because after the Oakland restaurant incident and like me being that's enough, the reactionary thing was, I can start a restaurant too. So I left to Oaxaca. We were there for like 6 months. And that's when it also was like, wait a minute, like me establishing a restaurant is, yes, it's great. And yes, I can do it. I mean, maybe can do it mostly because I have a child, and I'm like, that's a lot of work. But it's not something that I was like as passionate about as like public advocacy and talking about like the ways in which the tourism industry was still thriving, the way in which the Mezcal industry was also thriving mid-pandemic. Meanwhile, like the producers are like, oh, I haven't gotten payment from like the buyers. Meanwhile, right, like people respecting and coming without masks. Meanwhile, like the number of brands is like doubling. So I'm like, wait a minute, what is happening here?
Oh, so that moving to
And-
Oaxaca gave you really firsthand insight of the reality. We've heard of Oaxaca for the most part. Everyone heard of Oaxaca. I know it for being very artistic, really flourishing in the artisans of Mexico. But you bring up mezcal. And until I had met you, I didn't associate, not being a mezcal drinker, I didn't associate mezcal with Oaxaca. But in fact, it is very predominant and not as the consumeristic mentality from here. Can you share what that historical and traditional heritage is on mezcal?
Yes, I like to start with my first memory of mezcal, which was as a 4-ish-year-old in a community setting where one of my aunts / next door neighbors, because we're all family, se estaba curando de susto, de espanto. Sometimes it's susto, sometimes it's espanto. And there's like a whole ritual involving that. And mezcal is part of it. So we use it to douse people, the person that is like being healed. We go around and just douse the person, offer it to the ground, to the land as well as part of like the ritual.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring that up because that's how I understood mezcal when I was like a 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a moment in LA where there was like guerrilla marketing of a mezcal brand, and I went to a mezcaleria. And here's the thing, like it is exciting to go to a restaurant or a mezcaleria and see like mezcal from Oaxaca and see like Oaxacan food. But then it's like moments later, then it's like, wait a minute, this person that served me mezcal like has no connection to the spirit. And like the way that they served it was actually very cold, because the hospitality industry is like not always that hospitable towards people that look like me. And so maybe I'm probably reaching a little bit there, but there's definitely like people who are not welcomed in those spaces. They're not always inclusive spaces. And then, realizing that like mezcal was this like spirit that is being introduced in the US market and that is growing. And so that incited me to look more into what is happening. But yes, mezcal has always been associated, or not always, but I have always associated mezcal with something that is Oaxacan, because it is embedded in part of our communal lives. Ritual. It is considered medicine. It is something that we use as an exchange between peoples, families, and towns. And it is something that my parents used to make before we had to migrate. I'm from Santiago, Matatlan. It is the so-called world capital of mezcal. I say so-called because I love my town, but
Go ahead. Show the pride. Show the pride. Take the honor. Yes. So there's a spirituality to it. There's a spirituality that this isn't a party drink. This isn't considered along a communal relationship kind of drink. This is going back sounding to me from an indigenous point of view, with the spirituality, the gratitude to the earth, gratitude for bringing it forward, and how it can heal people, which is a completely different understanding. It was never introduced like that to us here in the US.
Yeah, no, unfortunately. Fortunately, we're done with the era of like mezcal is tequila's smoky cousin, because that's how it would get introduced to a lot of people. That's what I would see constantly. So we're over that, thank goodness. But it's still like, once it crosses the border, it is, you find it at bars and you find it at restaurants. It's not something that you find when being in a community with other people, as part of healing, as part of ritual, as part of ceremony, as part of like something that holds people together.
It's what gets shared amongst them in gratitude or in respect and healing. Completely different. And is it like that now?
I was going to say that, I'm painting something that I have memories of as a child, but the way that you can find mezcal in Oaxaca now has completely changed. Like the cultural change and shift that Oaxaca has experienced with mezcal as well has been pretty drastic, right?
Is the mezcal industry being infiltrated then? Are outsiders coming and taking advantage of I would say the process, the plant, the land?
In general, yes. That's how I look at things. That's how it looked like to me. Why? Because just in the last 10 years that I've gone back and forth since I got my green card, the fields full of monocropped maguey or agave has increased
Oh.
the deforestation, the number of palenques, and not just like the palenques are where it's distilled, but it's not quite a distillery in the sense that we understand it here.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually an extension of people's homes. But now we're seeing palenques that are built to produce at a commercial level with like stills and vats that, they are actually becoming distilleries and not really palenques anymore.
So is this a commercialism from within Mexico or is it outside of Mexico?
I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
I would say both because mezcal was like was not seen or esteemed or regarded as like a Mexican spirit. It was for poor, working class, indigenous people. And it's like something that was yucked. And it also experienced a prohibition. And tequila, on the other hand, right?
Yeah.
From Jalisco and like other regions, was regarded as like a Mexican spirit and like something that people were proud of, even though like so many brands are also like foreign.
Do you feel like these big brand, probably if they're commercializing into this big distilleries, are they pushing out what used to be the small family-owned palancas, or they still coexist?
I don't know that I can make like a judgment on that necessarily. I would say that they are, in the sense that the smaller palenques and the smaller producers are being somewhat like indirectly forced to produce for these bigger brands at like higher quantities. And so it makes it harder to hold on to like indigenous ecological knowledge or indigenous life ways, because now it's the monocropping, it's distillation year round instead of seasonal. It is, becoming very capitalistic, whereas before people would help each other to distill and to cook the maguey. Now it's like workers. And so there's like a money transfer. So it's more capitalistic practices that are being introduced, and the indigenous life ways are being erased. Yeah,
they're being erased. Which brings you back to Mi Oaxaca, your organization. Is this something you're trying to capture with your...
Absolutely. So right now what we've focused on primarily are private tastings, but our tastings are not to promote a brand or any brand necessarily. It's more to educate consumers about how mezcal exists within communities of Oaxaca, the ways in which communities used to make it before this boom, and how the industry and the category's growth is impacting the environmental, social, cultural, and economic conditions back home. So it's more of that. And it's also like, yes, of course, there's like a little bit of tasting, but it's not so heavily on the organoleptic components of it yet.
So you're trying to educate the drinkers of mezcal before we get too far into it, before it becomes even bigger, more along the way we view tequila. Like stop a minute, have a conscious understanding of how this mezcal comes to you. Would that be on point?
Really, like, honestly, encouraging people, like, try it. Because what we do is bring mezcales from producers, traditional mezcal. And I think some people don't like it. And I'm like, if you don't like it, it's because you haven't developed a palate for it, because, it's an acquired taste. Also, you don't have to like it. I think like there's this big push for everybody, like, you need to like mezcal is a thing. That does damage.
Yeah.
That does damage. And like, it's like people are not, if you're not ready for the consequences and to be accountable to those consequences, whether intentional or unintentional, like we need to walk with more caution is my belief. So I tell people, like, if you don't like it, you can try other ones, like come to the next tasting. Like, there's so many. And also, if you don't like it, it's okay. You don't have to like it just because everybody else is like into mezcal right now.
Right. It seems like here locally in the Bay Area, the mezcalerías, they're enormous amounts of options. I have never gone that route because I hit that smoky part and I pause. And it's like, I'm not the smoky spirit drinker. Alongside, I love whiskey, but not the smoky one. So I have to go further into that flavored journey then and find the one I do enjoy.
Yeah.
Is this available, this information on your website so that people can learn? Because not everyone's going to have immediate access to you and your tastings.
Yes, I have two things to say about that. Or two things to say. One is, yes, not all mezcales are smoky. So I would love at some point for you to try some of the ones that aren't.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's so much. And I think like, beverage or like spirits media did a thing when it's like it's tequila smoky cousin by like, setting that in our minds. That's number one. And then the other part is that information, we intentionally starting small and starting slow.
Good. Yeah.
Because it is like, is this content going to relate to people, or are they going to be offended by being told like, hey, your consumerism, our consumerism has impacts in the lives of people? Or is it going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know, and say more. And we're getting more of the latter, like, I didn't know, say more. Wow. Which is very validating. And, we're a fiscally sponsored project. So right now we are waiting to get our 501c3 designation.
Yes.
So that we can operate more at a public level. And we are also identifying some of the immigrant and Oaxacan owned brands, because they exist. And that's what we want to support.
Definitely.
Right? It's about like economic equity. It's about environmental sustainability. And it's also about like cultural justice.
Yes.
So finding where the intersection of those things is hard. And we're working on it.
Going back to the mezcal, because I am such an unknown. I have tried it in cocktails, but I have no knowledge. And now I know why I should have waited. Just everything about what creates the individual mezcals. Is that regional? Is it personal? Is this coming from an ancestral way of making it differently across the region?
I would say all of the above. So yes, by region, because Oaxaca has many microclimates. There's the sierras, there's the valley, there's the coast, though in the coast, traditionally, mezcal is not produced. There's jungles. So there's different kinds of soils. And even within Mazatlan, when we're going, like, there's places where it's like a little darker, other places where it's like a little bit more grayish, and then there's like red soil. So, I guess to like borrow or like use the concept of like terroir.
Yeah. Terroir. Yeah. Terroir. Yeah.
It's that also is going to have an impact on the taste. So it's going to influence the taste.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
definitely.
That's the concept.
Right.
And then of course there are the regional components, family components as well, where like some people will be able to tell you, oh, this mezcal is from, es un mezcal minero, so from Minas, or un mezcal miahuateco from Miahuatlan, or from Logoche, or from Matatlan. I would describe it as it is a very complex, it's one of the more complex spirits. And I would say that it's like very pure, because it's one plant, it's water, and it's like all the other elements, right?
Oh.
Water, fire, the natural yeast in the air, in that environment. So it's pretty pure, and like it's just astonishing the flavors that it could give.
So you go to the website. Yeah. Talk about the website. Is that?
Yeah. The information about like the trajectory and the story is there. The programs that we have available. So that's just one of the things. We're also working on doing another training for hospitality industry, BIPOC hospitality industry workers, because they're really that last person, like, who is going to like, are they going to transmit the knowledge, or is it just like, like,
or just
they have
sell.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting project as well that we're working on. Partners turning tables.
Oh, I love that. Turning tables. I love that. But I think your timing is impeccable when it comes to this educational consciousness, and especially when you're impacting other people's lives. I think buyers, consumers right now, there's a large push for not wanting to be on the bad side of consumerism, of wanting to know where their product comes from, how it's created, how it's impacted. Very much leaning towards small business. We've seen what corporate does. We've seen what commercialism, mass consumption does. And especially from the fashion industry, now we're being introduced to it from the hospitality industry. And yeah, I don't think people want to be part of that. They want to support, especially when it has such a spiritual origin with Indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
So these smaller brands, the ones that are from small vendors making their own in Oaxaca, are they available here in the US?
I would say that LA is probably one of the better places to have access to more diverse mezcales because there is a gigantic Oaxacan community in LA. And major cities in general as well, you'll be able to find it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, they do exist in California as well. A couple spots carry them. What I'll say about that is like, we're also working on really centering the education piece and giving folks, consumers, people the information that they need to make an informed decision because, there's like celebrity brands, which like for sure do not support, don't buy, right? Because like they're a problem.
Yes, right.
Even if they give back.
They're taking a lot more than they're giving back.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And then there are some brands that purchase small batches from amazing producers, but the producers are not always centered or highlighted, and not even just them, but like their communities, whole communities, not just families. Because I think that's the other part that I have seen is like you'll find on some of these mezcal websites, like, oh, we work with this family. They have X generations of experience doing this. And the thing is, with a lot of pueblos, there's a whole community. And if one investor or business goes and does business with one family, that actually creates division and mistrust between them. And Santiago Matatlan, the pueblo where I'm from, I think has been like a big target of that. There's, division capitalism does that, right? Like it divides and creates competition. So it actually deteriorates the social, cultural fabric of those communities instead of uplifting, even if they're just helping one family.
See, things like this, we would never, we haven't been raised in this community. The US is not community-based type of thinking. No, it's very isolating. It's very, the fear of pitting each other against one another. So this doesn't come into our thinking when like, oh, we're supporting this family. But in essence, it's like, no, not at all. You're disrupting the community. Even
exactly.
So, Lord.
Yeah.
I wanted to get back to speaking of this commercialism and touch on the impact just one more time of the local people and communities, the villages, where you're talking about monocrops, mass production. And I'm thinking right away, because we're here from California, major ag conscience and water. Is the commercialism of the plant for the mezcal, is it taking water away from the people who are living there?
Yes.
I'm like, hard yes. Hard yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it is on the pueblo level. And I can only speak to like Matatlan because that's where I'm from and that's where I have family, relatives, etc. But the water that's used, sure, a lot of it comes from a well that people build in their own homes. But some of it also can come from like the municipality. And that water is community water. And a lot of times, don't know the exact details, but they're taking more than what people are paying for. And so, honestly, if somebody were to do like a cost analysis or a COGS, as they call it, like if we were really to use a capitalistic checkpoint or like framework, like mezcal, most people would not be able to afford like more than one bottle a year, is my opinion.
Wow.
So yes, the water source is communal, number one. Number two is that because there is no infrastructure for mass production, there is also no waste management system or infrastructure for the waste that comes after production. And so not everybody, but some producers are also dumping the waste on the land. And I'm like, there's pictures. Like,
oh no.
I grew up being able to play in the arroyo, and now I would never put my child to play out there. There is no water, actually. It's dry, and it's just like,
oh no,
the mush.
Oh no. Oh, wicked.
That's super acidic.
Oh no.
It's reeks.
So it's too. Oh no. So it's toxic. It's going toxic back into the soil with the acidity, and so nothing can grow there. And I'm
essentially.
imagining that people still grow their own food, that they're not relying on a commercial impact for food. They're contaminating with the waste in this large production. So they didn't establish a framework for it beforehand. And the jurisdiction is just like turning a blind eye, like, oh, we're probably getting paid for this, so it's okay.
I think so that's the thing, right? Like, so the Pueblo where I'm from, at least, we use this system called usos y costumbres, which means that they were like a sovereign, self-governing community. And it's an indigenous governance system. And there are some other places in Latin America that still use it, but it's very rare and scarce. In Oaxaca, it's still pretty predominant. So there are no political parties on the Pueblo level. And so the real social responsibility lies with everybody, right? And Oaxaca has been experiencing a drought, immense drought, as Mexico has, right?
Oh, no. Yeah.
And we're going through an awful drought, leading to these wildland fires that have happening, especially this season. And there is no water because there's no rain. And so we're like, that, like, we do have a role, like our consumerism does impact the climate of other peoples. And like, that is why the invitation is like, are you ready to receive more Oaxacan immigrants into the U.S.? Are we going to open our doors and make them a barbacoa when they come in the way that we open our doors and invite you at our table? Or are we going to be discriminated against, othered, and seen as leeches and taking American jobs when it's your consumerism that led us to flee our country? Like, let's talk about the entire cycle.
Oh my God. Yeah. Gold frame on that one. Yes. That's it. That's it right there. You did a beautiful description of the impact that people, for some reason, it's like, this is mine and that's mine too, when they look at the world. And oh my Lord, I loved how you phrased that so passionately too. It's hard pause.
Thanks for embracing my passion sometimes. And thank you for like inviting it to come out. Cause it is, it's like, it's in your face.
No, like, this is the place. I mean, the authenticity with which you express that, having come from there, this is your homeland, literally your homeland. And we have to speak to the authenticity of it because it doesn't sit well. The more we learn from you and from other leaders, thought leaders on Indigenous land, on Natives land, on even countries where we roam freely into. I love how you phrase that. We roam freely into with the expectation that they want us. With Oaxaca in general being a very big travel destination, the Dia de los Muertos is really making it launch. Any of the movie commercialism is making it launch. Can you speak a little bit to that as well when it comes to just generally in provoking a conversation for people when they are traveling to these regions, that their presence has an impact they may not consider?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think media they're a double-edged sword because on one hand, again, like I mentioned earlier, it is exciting to see your homeland be on a list of like, go check it out. It's like amazing. And it's like, it's validating. It is amazing. Thank goodness that we're finally getting that recognition and that like applause that we've so long been deserving. And then on the other hand, it's the process. It's the how that is not, people don't pay attention to. It's the hard labor. It's the invisible labor. Like, hey, if you're going to go, like, learn some basic stuff. Or here's like some etiquette to understand that you are going into someone else's home, that you are a guest. Don't appropriate. Don't go there to start your own Mezcal brand or your own textile. That is even forcing many of us Oaxacan folk to like engage in the commercialization of our own culture because that's what ends up happening.
Wow.
Which is, it's hard.
Tricky.
Because it's tricky.
Yeah.
There's that. It's a both and for me. I wrote a piece a while ago about how to travel to Oaxaca, and the thesis was like, actually, it's not even the thesis, the fantasy, and I'm naming that it is a fantasy, so not realistic, is that people can travel to other countries when they're invited there, right? If we're going to unlearn, if like colonialism is like going and settling and like not going to people's homes, places without permission, then the opposite of that is to go only when we have permission. I craved like traveling. I craved learning about other people, other culture, other places. And I think it was because it's who I am. I like to be around.
Yeah.
And number two, it's because I was undocumented, and it's just like, what does that feel like? I feel trapped not being able to like travel, right? So it's like those two things combined. And so when I got my green card, the first international trip that I took was to Italy. And it's because I was invited. My friend had moved there with her husband. And, you know, she knew my undocumented status. And I told her, I was like, I got my green card. So she's like, you're getting in the plane this month, this week, you're staying with us. I would not, my experience of Italy is so homey. It's so Pueblo-like. It was like amazing.
Yeah.
And I was invited. I didn't go like as a tourist. And there's a difference when you're invited and you're wanted there versus when you're not wanted there, because like how you're going to behave is questionable.
Yeah. I remember in Peru, that's where my mom is from. And this is back, I feel like in the 90s, we were down there. And the world had just discovered Pima cotton. Pima cotton comes from Peru, and it's just like, oh, silk. It was very, like you say, it was grown for the country. It was, you know, they did not do export, import. It's like, we're fine. We don't want debt. We have, you know, for ourselves. Thank you very much. And Calvin Klein really wanted access to the Pima cotton. And they just kept waving dollars and dollars and dollars to the growers. And they're like, still no, we're good. Thanks. I was like so proud, like, yes, you know, turning down the big money and saying, no, we'll keep this for ourselves. Thanks. Or if we're going to let it out, it's going to be on our terms. I really love that. Yeah.
That's real power.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
So your son, how old is he now? He's
6.5, almost 7.
So cute. So young. How are you raising him with this knowledge that you have and this passion, this love for your heritage, for your homeland, for Oaxaca? How are you raising him in the understanding of your heritage?
I think I'm doing a good job.
Of course you are. I just want everyone else to know what the great job is you are. Share the tips. Like, how is it? How do you raise your son or your child here in the U.S.?
Yeah. First 5 years has been a lot of binational living. I mean, It has been what I would consider like, I don't like either words, investment and sacrifice. It has been a responsibility. There you go. That sounds better.
Yeah.
To really center having him experience home in Oaxaca and home here. Since he was in the belly, I was like, we're going to Oaxaca because we just need to be there, you know?
Like absorb the essence. Yes. Absorb the essence of spirituality. Yes. Breathe it in.
Eat this food.
Yes. Yes. And everything that comes with it, all the love, all the understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, since he was in the belly, I'm like, we have to spend some time there while I'm pregnant. And then 8 weeks postpartum, we left to the land because I'm like, I still want this baby to experience infancy, like almost newborn. I just let the cuarentena, the 40 days pass by, and I'm like, all right, let's go.
Nice.
And just be there. And then ever since then, right? Like going back and forth. My mom, you know, she still makes her nixtamal and makes her tlayudas. And so he knows that, you know, what a salt taco is and is one of his favorites. He loves chapulines. So introducing him to those foods, the grasshoppers. This is the cutest part is as he's grown, people asking, oh, where's Camilo? Or like, are you bringing Camilo this time? Because there are moments or times when I haven't taken him. And him having like friends or people who recognize him.
Yeah.
Like, you know, as part of the community, as part of the pueblo. And then here, I would say that if I'm gonna keep it real, like one of the things that has facilitated me transmitting the Oaxaqueña, like Zapotec culture to him is parenting without the other parent.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're able to speak more Spanish at home and Zapoteco. So my parents, they speak it and like we practice here at home. He knows his numbers. He knows some phrases. He knows how to respond, some basic stuff. I remember when he was a baby, like he understands. I'm like, okay, if there's anything I do, I want him to understand that mezcal is like medicine first. And, going to the pueblo where he would get hurt and they would put mezcal on him or like douse him as for a limpia.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he was like 3 years old, he had a baby and his baby hurt itself. And so he's like, Mom, I need a mezcal for my baby.
Yes. And you're like, yes.
I'm like, my job is done.
Yes, exactly. My job is done. And launch. Oh, I love that. Oh, so little and already understanding, like just not differentiating, just saying this is just my life and being therefore able to choose for himself. What is resonating within him? What is he leaning towards? What makes, more sense to his soul?
Yeah.
Oh, I love the exposure.
Yeah.
And plus taking him back after 40 days. But that's another thing I'm finding very shockingly cold here is the infancy and the way the mothers are left and the trends in which they're taking care of the baby here. I was shocked because I didn't see that, obviously don't know about myself, but having my mother and the tribe, I would call it a tribe of women, all her friends, and how they treated my babies. The baby was never not held. That is the best way to say it. The baby was never not held. And all of that love and that comfort and that you are not alone feel doesn't happen now without that. It's like the baby is so often left alone. And I was like, oh, it's like a little crack in my heart happens. It's like, oh, but no. And they're like, no, don't get the baby used to being held. It's like, oh, I don't think any people that struggled in life going forward were held too much. I just don't believe that. Oh my Lord.
You bring up a really like important point in the ways that I have like intentionally mothered, not in like a very Americanized ways. Like, there's articles, there's research, and I'm like, okay, there's that, but there's also tradition and there's culture. And for sure, like for me, co-sleeping, I co-slept.
Mm-hmm.
Because my mom made this like comment a long time ago. She's like, why is it that rich people now like poor people's lifestyle?
Right. Without giving them the credit, without acknowledging where the ancient came from. It's as though it's theirs.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that.
Skip the generation that still practice it. They're like, it's so ancient. It's like way in the past. And I'm like, no, we're still here practicing it.
That is part of the appropriation, though.
Absolutely.
When you're going outside, you're learning from the people who it is their expertise. It is their ancestral knowledge. It is what they pass on generation to generation. And you're taking that and declaring yourself as the expert. You're taking their knowledge, their ancestral heritage, and you're declaring it as you're the expert. That doesn't sit well with me. I do call it out. Just so you know, I call it out on your behalf.
Thank you. That's part of cultural preservation is like, it is like stepping in when like somebody who's not of the culture and speaking on their behalf and being like, hold on, pause.
Hard pause.
To me, that's part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I've definitely talked about that. And if I may add, that is actually precisely why we're designing these cultural education courses. They're geared at BIPOC folk. That includes Oaxacan of the diaspora folk. And there are a couple examples that come to mind as to why that is. It's because I myself, like I mentioned, understood mezcal in a communal setting, in a family setting. And then when I started reading books, I started reading these articles that would come out and I would read about that and then going back home and seeing what was happening and understood that people who have access, who have the privilege to travel, have the privilege to take 3 months off, 6 months off and spend them in Oaxaca, go to different regions and different palenques and connect with different families and have access to like other industries and knowledge from other industries that'll inform how they understand mezcal, have access to capital, to resources, social and financial capital. Of course they know more because it's all based on privilege though. That's the difference. Because if you ask a producer from Central Valley, Valles Centrales, to taste a mezcal from Sola de Vega or Miahuatlan or even La Mixteca, they probably haven't even tried it because they don't even have the privilege to travel. And then when I go to mezcal events or when I've gone to mezcal events in Oaxaca and when I see other Mexican folk and I share this experience or like the project that I'm working on and 2, 3, 4, who knows how many mezcal is in, truth comes out, which is like, oh my gosh, that's such a wonderful program. Yeah, because Oaxacans don't know anything about their culture. And I'm like, okay, that shows me it doesn't even offend me anymore because mainly because it just shows me how internalized the anti-indigeneity is. But it does validate, like, yeah, you're right. This program, this organization is centering BIPOC people because we've had the least access to resources, to travel, to knowledge, to books, to educations that are accessible, fun, informative, engaging. Of course, we're not going to know as much. But don't get it twisted. It's not because we're not smart. It's because of access issues.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I love that. Of course. Absolutely. For the listeners here now, what would be the one passionate takeaway that you would hope they've culled from this conversation?
It's to honor the people who still have and are still part of traditional Indigenous knowledge and not to skip us.
Love that.
That's it. Don't skip us. Like, we're here. We have the knowledge. Like, we also deserve access to our own culture. And that's what we're trying to do as well through Mi Oaxaca. And like, yes, I get it. A lot of it is ancestral, but like, we are also ancestors in the making. And some of us have not had as much access to be an expert or to have those platforms, or maybe don't desire to be presenting in that way. And give credit where credit is due. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I love that. Give credit where credit is due. Yeah. Thank you for that. That is one thing to just sit in for a lot of different experiences when you go out in the world. But yeah, especially Oaxaca and especially Mezcal. On a personal note for you, we know where your passion lies. We learned your journey and how you present yourself in the world. What is something we wouldn't guess about you?
Let's see. What is something that you wouldn't guess about me is I didn't want to start an organization. I didn't want to start a nonprofit. I didn't want to start like a social enterprise. I'm a solo type of person, solo type of girl.
Oh. What's your big dream for this journey?
Well, the big dream is to really establish it as a social enterprise and center like cultural education, really educate people. Because I think like when we talk about what's missing in the world, it's education, cultural education. And also provide a platform for small producers that still hold on to traditional Indigenous knowledge in their products and have like be a place where we can, offer those products that they otherwise wouldn't be able to offer. This is like something that I'm growing, but I want others to grow, the future generation to take on. I aspire to have many lifetimes in one lifetime, so we'll see after this.
Well, what would that be? What if you could walk through any portal and have your next experience? What does that look like for you?
I would say there would be more of a focus on like the creative elements that I'm like flirting with, like writing, doing more of that. I just have, there's just so many stories, so many experiences to share and to I think would be good to put out in the world. Definitely. I don't feel quite ready yet. But I think even just like this journey is something to share with the next generation or like, because it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
But thankful and gratitude that you had the wherewithal, the energy, the power, the passion to bring it to life. Where can people access your website, get more knowledge from you? Do you have social handles, the name of the website?
So the website is mioaxaca.org, MIOAXACA.org is the website. Social media is at mi.oaxaca. That's Instagram, actually. That's where we're mostly active. And then the personal one is Oaxaca the Talk, OAXACTHETALK, for a more unfiltered.
Your life, you upfront personal. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have this gracious spirit about you. You're so like of the earth. I've always felt that of you. You're like from of the earth. It's just like this passion and this existence that doesn't feel taught. And you have this fire and this, empowerment, this strength. It's just, I love orbiting around this. I love being in your universe, even if it is remotely right now. I do. It's like being around the sun. I just get a lot of feel good energy and a lot of, like, for me, a call to action, like be more aware, be more responsible, think about it in your spaces, no matter where the space. So, I really appreciate you talking with us today, Fabiola. It's just been I've been trying to keep my jaw closed, like what? So much what? But yeah, thank you so much for your knowledge, for your passion, for really calling us to act at a higher level of humanity, especially in your Oaxacan motherland.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy. Yeah.
I told you she was amazing. Fabiola Santiago, amazing educator and thought leader, just salt of the earth and how she lives life, fights for justice, and embraces us all to learn about her treasured homeland. This was a truly special episode with an intimate call to action, to honor and to respect and appreciate the folks who have protected their traditions and cultures, allowing us the privilege of experiencing it firsthand. Remember to join us next week for our 15-minute Pod Club episode that pulls the life gems from Fabiola's conversation. These powerful life lessons can resonate with each of us in ways that help us individually feel a sense of belonging, of being understood, and of standing in community. Because there is that commonality that runs through all our thoughts, all our actions. We are all together in this. And just a hint, next week's episode is definitely going to hit on considering how we walk in the world. And are we being careful of not treading on others as we wander in our own glorious journeys? See you in September. Have a fabulous holiday weekend and step into your truth, ladies. Ciao. We love that you have subscribed to this podcast and continue to champion women who understand the life of all things Latina. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Encuentras Your Voice podcast so you don't miss a single episode. They will automatically drop into your listening device each week. And we'd really, really appreciate if you take a moment to add to the reviews that we already have. Tell us what you like, tell us what you're hoping to hear, and we will get there. Share this with your friends and family to help us grow our comunidad, and keep following us on our social media to Encuentras Your Voice. We are so grateful to you for helping us grow this community and would love to learn of all the amazing Latinos who you know are creating the world we thrive in. So reach out to me on social media at Encuentras Your Voice, and let's keep leaning into our authenticity in pride. Help us make Encuentras Your Voice the place where you are 100% represented.